Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Microsoft Teams webinar from LoopUp, where I am joined today by Zach Bennett, our solutions architect based in the UK. Hello, Zach. Thank you for joining.
Hello.
And I'm Lee Henderson, the Director of Consulting for Asia Pacific here at LoopUp. And today we're going to be talking about dispelling some of the myths of Operator Connect. And really just sort of digging into what Operator Connect is. And I think one of the big things that we should probably start with, Zach, is, well, what is Operator Connect and how is it different from direct routing?
Yeah. So it's probably best, let's start with direct routing first. So direct routing can be provided in two main flavors for a customer. One of them being via an on-premises solution, such as a session border controller. Those session border controllers being Teams certified direct routing devices that are hosted either virtual or physical on a customer's site. Or the other flavor, which is something that LoopUp sell, is their direct routing as a service model. So effectively, a cloud-based solution that you can interact with and integrate into your tenant to have direct routing delivered to your customers. So a lot of people said that direct routing, or especially direct routing as a service, was the baby Operator Connect. It's what Operator Connect then become. So effectively, Operator Connect is a Microsoft certified solution. So again, it's a truly cloud-based solution, and you go through a rigorous set of testing with Microsoft around your infrastructure and testing around call quality and lots of other testing to get certified to be on their program to deliver PSTN calls via Operator Connect.
As essentially a Microsoft certified carrier partner. And yeah, there's the tests that are done to make sure that your solution complies with Microsoft's infrastructure. They are very, very deep and they're very thorough to make sure that your infrastructure is as it says it is and will function as it is supposed to and will provide a guaranteed level of quality to your customers at the end of the day. I mean, one of the other big things that I've sort of heard going around recently and heard people concerned about is that if if a customer decides that they want to go with Operator Connect, and they browse to TAC and they find a provider that suits their requirements, there's the concern there that once they pull those numbers from their existing carrier into that Microsoft certified Operator Connect partner, those numbers are just, it'll be like calling plans where you can use the numbers in Teams and that's it. But really, that's not the case, is it?
No, it's definitely not the case. So that was probably true when we were talking about calling plans. But Operator Connect gives you much more flexibility on what you can do with those numbers if you choose the right provider. So that's probably the one key thing, is to make sure that you choose the provider that can support exactly what you need. For example, here at LoopUp, we can provide Operator Connect for over 48 countries now. So that's number one across all of the carrier partners currently in the program. That's the most countries. But alongside that, we've also got our direct routing as a service platform. So for any particular countries, we can, provide that, or just SIP trunks. So let's say you've got a third-party hosted environment, or some platform or analog integration on site. We could do both of those things.
I mean, one of the greatest sort of examples of that is when you've got a piece of legacy infrastructure that you're still sweating, and something like that I often come across is like a Cisco contact center.
Exactly.
And it's generally something that you've invested a lot of money in, and you really wish to sort of get the most out of that infrastructure as possible before retiring it. And so being able to keep that online for just that unique purpose that it has, while being able to reap the benefits of Teams calling for, the rest of your business, which is generally, let's face it, a much larger proportion of the overall total users. It really does give you the ability to just say, look, we'll keep that, move everyone else to Operator Connect, and we can be much more flexible, harness some of the benefits of calling in Teams. And for that, I'm thinking of things like remote work, more direct access to your work number. So your staff members, if they're field based, they've got their business number with them, and you don't need to have both mobile and a business number, as well as, well, really simple hot desking if that's the sort of solution that you're after. So there's a bunch of benefits there.
Yeah, one of the key benefit as well is for migrating your actual estate as well. So
absolutely.
When you're moving across, you can be much more methodical, and you don't have to go with those big bang approaches. So once, let's say, a group of numbers have been ported to us, let's say LoopUp really has that flexibility to kind of say, this group of numbers go to your existing Cisco environment, everything else go to Operator Connect, and you can choose in what groups you move people across to Teams.
Exactly. And it's then uncoupled from, I mean, in a lot of cases when you do a number port, there's a minimum number of numbers that you need, you can move at any one time. Like it could be 10 numbers, it could be 100. And so having to pick 100, numbers that are next to each other and move them all over, well, there might be, a fax or two, or there might be, if it's a finance business, there might be a couple of users that are using SIP trading turrets that need to stay. If you've moved to an agile carrier that provides that multipath approach, then you could do, 10 numbers here, 5 numbers there, and just really have a lot more control over the solution than what you would from, yes, you get the solution flexibility that you really want when you're moving over from an older technology to Teams calling. So yeah, that is definitely a big benefit of using a more flexible carrier. I think on the flip side of that would be, if you look at somewhere in the world where there aren't any carriers, and I mean, you mentioned before that 48 number of the number of Operator Connect countries that we're currently able to provide in. On top of that, you mentioned direct routing, which is currently sitting at 67 countries for us. But then if there were a country, let's say like one that I was working on this afternoon, Oman, if there were a country like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get Teams voice at all, right?
Yeah, and again, it doesn't mean that you can't have Teams voice. It's just choosing the right provider, for you. So let's take that example of a location such as Oman, or another big one is the UAE. That's a closed market. They won't allow anyone else, or a very limited number of carriers to be registered and regulated in that location. So what the right provider will do for you is have something like a BYOC, or bring your own carrier model with a direct routing. So for example, in LoopUp's case, we can have either a virtualized or a physical SBC sat inside of Dubai, leveraging that carrier relationship that you currently have, in that region. And effectively what we'll do is we'll fold that in to your solution. And so just because they're in Dubai doesn't mean that they can't be on Teams. They can still follow the rest of your organization and move to Teams calling.
Should probably dig into a little bit, the difference between a virtual and a physical SBC, and why there really needs to be that differentiation, what are the differences there? I mean, for my money, using a virtual SBC is always going to be the most desirable path in a location like Dubai or what have you, purely from the factor that it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot easier, essentially because there's no physical hardware, there's no, physical device that needs to be looked after. You don't need to worry about, individual UPS requirements and so on and so forth. And in fact, in most locations, you can host it in the cloud. However, it does require a certain type of trunk, and it does require a SIP trunk. And as a result, that's something that we would need to, your carrier in country would need to be able to migrate your existing trunks or your existing numbers to SIP. And, our consultants are quite adept at helping with guiding you on what is required in that path. But on the flip side, if you're in a location where, let's say, you only have ISDN or perhaps even analog telephone lines, and I've run into this in a couple of locations, and we've had, we can support it. A physical device is required to either terminate that ISDN, so that E1 T1 circuit, or the analog ports. So there'd be individual analog ports in the back of the device that you would connect them to. Those usually are coming in as sort of a rotary group, so for a main number, for a contact center or something to that effect. The other thing that you would need that physical SBC for, and we kind of touched on that earlier, would be flipping things upside down. So if you have on-premises analog devices that are to be retained, then that's where a SIP trunk being sent down from LoopUp would be able to provide those. And it's going back to that previous point that we were talking about. So those analog, let's say, fax machines, or maybe there's a door phone, although there are more modern ways to provide that sort of solution these days. I think eFax is basically synonymous in a lot of parts of the world these days. It's very widespread these days. And it is definitely becoming the default option for deploying fax these days, instead of the old screaming machine, which it'll disappear one day. The only other place that I think we should talk about, or the only other reason why I think we should really talk about using a physical SBC, or the other reason why it might be still necessary to have one in your network, in this bring your own carrier type solution, is there are some countries in the world, I mean, number portability is generally pretty good. It's generally fairly well available. In Europe, in the United States, in Singapore, which is really where it was first kind of developed and pioneered, very good. But there are some locations where number portability is either hit and miss, so it's a little bit difficult, and we do face that a lot down here in APAC. And then there are some locations where portability is just not possible whatsoever. And the big one there is China. So in China, number portability is really not an option. And so using that BYOC to keep your existing telephone numbers on your existing lines may be your only way to retain those numbers. But again, if new numbers are okay, then you can deploy new numbers. And we do see a blend of that, in that sometimes we're going to see a certain portion of numbers that need to be retained. And that might be main numbers. It might be executives that don't wish to give up their number because they've had it for so long. But then, the rest of the office, well, they might be okay to have another, a new number provided. And in that case, you can actually be pretty, you can mix and match quite nicely. So those critical numbers, bring your own carrier. Everyone else, Operator Connect.
Yeah, and just to mention China, that's one of the main things where a provider like LoopUp can help. we're an operator connect. We have a direct routing as a service platform, but China's not available on operator connect, not for anybody yet. LoopUp included. Uh, but we can deliver. We're a licensed carrier in China, so we can actually deliver new numbers, directly into China via our direct routing as a service model. So, if having that blend and making sure that you choose that right provider that can do everything you need, whether that's having numbers delivered by operator connect, whether it's what we spoke about before around delivering SIP trunks to existing infrastructure, um, or whether that be getting numbers in a location like China, or being able to provide Teams connectivity via an on-premises SBC or BYOC in a country like UAE. Making sure that you find that provider that can do everything for you is a real key aspect.
And I would say that it's a very good idea, like to really look at your overall sort of, not just the overall requirements, but your overall global footprint, and try and really choose as few partners as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from my point of view, it'd be very logical for an Australian customer, like if they're headquartered in Australia, they might say, all right, well, I'll just pick up, a local carrier down here. It might be Telstra. If they're a Canadian company, that might be Rogers that they choose as their primary Teams voice provider. But then you're going to run into the situation potentially where, okay, well, what does Thailand do? What does New Zealand do? What does the UK do? Do they find their local carrier? Do they sign a local contract with that local carrier? I mean, they can, but then you're still in the same situation you are now, where every office or location has to have that satellite sort of approach to managing their individual communication needs. And I mean, that was logical once upon a time, because the Australian office of a Canadian company would have a local contract with a local PBX vendor and a local contract with a local carrier. And okay, well, that's really the only way to do it, because managing that across the globe is kind of difficult. But we're to the point now where managing a global PBX is, well, it's easy. I mean, you're already managing Teams globally most of the time when you're a multinational provider. You've got a single point of contact where you're managing your licensing, and then you can disseminate that power down to local administrators so they can add new accounts, provide that user with a Teams license or an E3 or an E5 license. That's all within your workflow already. So it seems logical to me that having a single or as few as possible carriers looking after that carrier solution for you will really help you sort of bring all of that management down to a nice tight, sort of area. And it allows your users to then be freed up. So you don't have to have your IT personnel in a remote location, then spending a heap of time on vendor management and spending a heap of time on negotiating, fresh contracts. You can manage it centrally straight from the Teams admin center, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think it's important. If you're making the journey to Teams, you've already kind of chose that single partner for Teams, and that's Microsoft. So why would you choose Microsoft and then go and find 4, 5, 6, 7
20
different carriers in each location?
Exactly.
Find one that does them all, and they're gonna be able to provide that. And one key thing to layer in there as well is when you choose that right provider, you're going to get benefits as well around those centralized managements and savings at scale around the organization. Things like a global management portal, so you can see your operator connect numbers right next to your direct routing as a service numbers, right next to your direct routing on premises numbers, right next to your Cisco numbers, all in one portal. And you're going to be able to see and manage those very simply across your estate.
Yeah. No more guesswork as to, how many, and I don't know about you, but I've helped so many customers over the years where we've gone through and found that they've had hundreds and thousands of numbers that they weren't using. They were just sitting there
Yeah.
costing them money. And when you
Yep.
port them all in and they're in one dashboard that you can be like, okay, well, here's the Sydney office and we've got, 150 employees and we've got 400. Wait, hang on. You can get rid of some of those numbers and save you. I mean, it's a saving.
Yeah, and to add to that, the kind of converse of, okay, we're growing in Germany,
Yep.
so we need 50 numbers in Berlin.
Yep.
Wait, how many numbers do we have? Let's try and figure it out. Let's try and dig out all telephony contracts. If you can see, okay, straight away go to a management portal and see, oh, I have 100 numbers available, or I have 10 numbers available. I need to go and order more. And to be able to go into one place and actually place an order and have those numbers appear for you directly in the portal is a very powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like no need to call an account manager or, send an email to request a new service or anything. No, it's just like, please, I want this many in this office, go. And
Exactly.
part of that whole Operator Connect system is, the automation and the connectivity, the real tight connectivity between Microsoft Teams and your carrier, so that it's not just making a ticket in, some queue somewhere in the background. It's all just going to go ahead and make that happen because it's all built to be as automated, as fast as possible. And I think that's really, really good, a good thing to know. And look, it is definitely, to go back to one of our previous points, that's definitely a very big differentiator between Operator Connect and direct routing. Because while direct routing, some providers did have that automation in place, a lot didn't.
Yeah.
And a lot still required a lot of manual handling in the background. So it is definitely another nice thing that you are going to definitely get by choosing this solution. So I think with that, we should probably wrap it up. But, before we go, Zach, I understand that you've been on the keyboard doing a little bit of creative writing.
Yeah, so to go along with this webinar, there'll actually be a written blog post that'll go out on the LoopUp website. Just again, kind of covering some of the key topics that we spoke about today around dispelling those myths around Operator Connect. So yeah, that'll definitely get shared, and also as well as that, LoopUp have gone through the effort of updating our white papers as well. So, anywhere where we've actually spoke about Operator Connect, we're making sure that they're completely updated and have the most relevant information in there regarding that.
And look, if there's anything that, that we haven't covered here about Operator Connect and, anything there, then by all means reach out. Our consulting specialists can always give you a one-on-one discussion and maybe talk a little bit deeper about your requirements. If you would like to know more, you can also dive into in the Teams Admin Center under Voice. You can go to Operator Connect and then all providers, and we're in there. And you can click on View Our Offer, and you can see the full map of our coverage. And there's also a contact section at the bottom of that website that you can use to get in touch with us if you want any further info. But there you go. All right, Zach. Well, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Lee.
And your knowledge. And thank you, everyone else out there, for joining us today. We hope to hear from you soon.